You've been growing potatoes the same way your whole life. You dig a little trench, you drop the potatoes in, you cover them up, and you wait. And come harvest time, you dig around in the dirt and you pull up a handful of decent spuds, enough for a few suppers, maybe a pot of soup, and you tell yourself that's just how it goes. That's just what one plant gives you. But what if I told you that the Amish on the very same patch of ground, with the very same seed potato, pull up nearly double what you do, not because they have better soil, not because they have some secret seed you can't buy, but because they do a handful of small things, quiet, old-fashioned things that most of us were never taught. And the biggest one, the one that genuinely doubles a harvest, comes near the very end of this story. And I promise you, once you understand it, you'll never look at a potato plant the same way again. So stay with me all the way through, because the secret that turns one plant into a small mountain of potatoes is the kind of thing you'll wish somebody had told you 20 years ago. Now, if you grew up before everything came shrink-wrapped and trucked in from 1,000 miles away, some of this is going to feel like coming home. Maybe you remember a grandparent with a root cellar. Maybe you remember the smell of cool earth and burlap, the sound of potatoes tumbling into a wooden crate, the way a good keeper potato felt heavy and solid in your hand in the dead of January. There was a time when nearly every family knew how to coax a real harvest out of a small garden, because they had to. A bad potato year meant a hungry winter. So folks paid attention. They watched. They learned what worked, and they passed it down, hand to hand, season to season, and they didn't waste a thing. The Amish never stopped doing that. While the rest of the world handed its food over to factories and grocery chains and called it progress, they just kept on growing the way their great-grandparents grew, quietly, patiently, season after season, for going on 300 years now. And the funny thing is, they're not doing anything magical. There's no trick you can't learn. Every single thing they do, you can do this year, in your own backyard, with tools you already own and dirt you already have. They just never forgot the parts the rest of us let slip away. And here's the part that ought to make you a little bit angry, if you let it. There's a whole industry built on you not knowing this. The seed companies, the garden centers, the glossy magazines, they'll happily sell you the fancy fertilizers and the special grow bags and the miracle sprays. But the things that actually double a potato harvest, they're nearly free. They cost you a little patience and a little attention and almost nothing else. There's no profit in telling a man he can grow twice the food with a pile of straw and a few extra minutes of work. So nobody tells him. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because nobody could make $1 off it. The Amish just never had anybody around trying to sell them something, so they kept the whole thing, start to finish, exactly as it always was. So that's what I want to give you today. The whole thing, start to finish, the way they actually do it. We're going to walk through every step, from before the potato ever touches the ground, all the way to the cool, dark cellar where it'll wait out the winter. And I'm going to explain the why behind each step, because once you understand why something works, you'll never forget to do it. By the end, you'll see exactly how all these little pieces stack up on top of each other until, almost without realizing it, you've doubled what one plant gives you. Stay to the end, because the very last steps are the ones that close the loop and make this whole thing free, forever, year after year. That's the part that surprised even me, and it all starts long before you ever pick up a shovel. That's the first thing most folks get wrong. We think growing potatoes begins on planting day, when the soil's warm and the calendar says go. But the Amish know better. For them, it begins weeks earlier, in a cool room with a little light coming through the window, with the seed potatoes laid out where you can keep an eye on them. They call it chitting. It's an old word, and it just means letting your seed potatoes wake up and sprout before they ever go in the ground. You take your seed potatoes, the ones you've saved or bought for planting, and instead of leaving them shut up in a dark sack until planting day, you set them out in a single layer where they can catch some indirect light. An old egg carton works beautifully for this, one potato sitting in each little cup, with the end that has the most eyes facing up toward the light. A shallow wooden tray works just as well. You put them somewhere cool but not cold, somewhere bright but out of the harsh direct sun, and then you do the hardest thing a gardener ever has to do. You wait. And while you wait, something quietly remarkable happens. Those eyes, the little dimples scattered across the skin of the potato, begin to stir. After a few days, you'll see the first nubs pushing out, pale at first. But because you've given them light instead of darkness, they don't grow long and white and weak and stringy the way sprouts do in a forgotten bag in the pantry. Instead, in the light, they come out short, stout, sturdy, and dark green or purple tinged, thick as your little finger and tough as can be. And those stocky little sprouts are the whole secret to a head start. Think of it like this. A potato that goes into cold spring soil straight from the bag has to spend its first 2 or 3 weeks just waking up before it ever sends a single shoot up toward the light. Those are weeks lost, weeks of warm sun and good growing weather slipping by while the potato stretches and yawns underground. But a chitted potato? It hits the dirt already awake, already reaching, with those stout green sprouts ready to leap up the moment they feel the warmth. You've handed it a 3-week head start before the season even begins. And in a short growing season, 3 weeks is the difference between a handful of small spuds and a basket of big ones. The plants come up earlier, they bulk up earlier, and they finish before the late blight and the killing frosts ever get a chance to take them. There's something else those weeks of chitting do for you too, and it's the kind of quiet wisdom that comes from doing a thing a few hundred times. While your seed potatoes sit there in the light, they're telling you which ones are worth planting. A potato that's soft, that's shriveling, that won't push out a single good sprout, that one was never going to amount to anything in the ground. The old folks just set it aside. Better to find out on the windowsill in March than to dig up an empty hole in July where a plant should have been. So chitting isn't only a head start, it's a sorting. You're choosing your strongest before you ever lift a shovel, and a garden built on your strongest plants is a garden that gives back double. Now, once those sprouts are good and stocky, and the soil out in the garden is warmed enough that it's not cold to the touch, it's time to get them ready for planting. And here's where a lot of folks waste good potatoes without ever knowing it. They take a whole seed potato, drop it in the ground, and figure bigger is better. But the Amish are a careful, thrifty people, and they've learned you can stretch one good seed potato into 3 or 4 plants, and end up with more harvest, not less. Here's how. You take your chitted seed potato and you look it over carefully, the way you'd read a map. You're looking for the eyes, those little dimples where the sprouts are coming out. Then you take a clean, sharp knife and you cut that potato into chunks. And the only rule you follow is this. Every single piece has to have at least 1 strong eye on it, and ideally 2. Each chunk wants to be about the size of a large egg, with enough potato flesh around the eye to feed that sprout while it sets its first roots. A piece with no eye will just rot in the ground. It's got nothing to grow from. But a good piece with 2 strong eyes is a whole new plant waiting to happen. So a single fist-sized seed potato might give you 3 or 4 planting pieces, and each one of those becomes its own plant, its own little factory, making potatoes underground. That's the kind of multiplying these folks have always understood. Why plant 1 potato to get 1 plant when with a sharp knife and a careful eye you can plant 1 potato and get 4? But now, and this is the step almost everybody skips, the step that separates a good harvest from a row of rotted blanks. You do not plant those freshly cut pieces right away, you've just opened them up. You've exposed all that wet, raw, white flesh to the world, and if you bury that open wound straight into cool, damp spring soil, it's an invitation. Every fungus and bacteria in that dirt comes to the supper table, and your seed piece rots before it ever gets a chance to root. So instead, you let them heal. You lay your cut pieces out, cut side up, in a single layer somewhere cool and dry and airy, a shed, a porch, a spare table out of the weather, and you leave them for a day or 2, sometimes 3, and while they sit, something almost magical happens to those wet wounds. The exposed flesh dries, toughens, and forms a dry, leathery skin right over the cut. That's called callousing, and it's the same way a scab forms over a scrape on your own hand. That tough little seal is armor. It keeps the moisture and the rot out, and it protects all the good starch inside that the sprout needs to live on. Bury a calloused piece, and instead of rotting, it roots. It's the simplest thing in the world. Just patience, just a day or two of waiting, and it can be the difference between a full row and a row full of gaps. Now, while those pieces are healing, that's your time to get the bed ready, and the ground you give a potato matters more than most people ever realize. The Amish don't plant into hard, heavy, packed-down clay. A potato is, in the end, a swollen underground stem, and it needs room to swell. If the soil's tight and heavy, the tubers come out small and knobby and twisted, fighting for every inch. But give them deep, loose, fluffy soil, well-worked and full of good aged compost, and they spread out fat and round and smooth, growing as big as the room you give them. So a potato bed gets dug deep and worked loose, with plenty of finished compost turned all the way through it, dark, crumbly, sweet-smelling stuff that holds moisture but still drains free, because the one thing a potato can't abide is sitting in soggy, waterlogged ground where it'll only rot. And notice what they don't reach for, what so many eager gardeners pour on thinking they're helping. And that's fresh manure. It seems like it ought to help, doesn't it? Strong, rich, straight from the barn. But fresh manure is one of the surest ways to ruin a potato crop, because it brings on a thing called scabs, rough, corky brown patches that crust over the skin and make the whole potato ugly and hard to peel. The Amish learned long ago to keep the fresh stuff far away from the potato row. Instead, they use compost that's been left to age and mellow and break all the way down, so it feeds the soil gently without inviting that scabby trouble. Patience again, you see, always patience. The old way is rarely the fast way, but it's nearly always the way that works. Now we come to it, the real secret. The thing that doubles the harvest, the trick that turns one humble seed piece into a buried treasure chest of potatoes. It's called hilling. And once you understand why it works, you'll never grow a potato flat in the ground again. Here's the thing almost nobody tells you. A potato doesn't form on the roots. It forms along the stem, the part of the stem that's buried underground in the dark. Every inch of stem you cover with soil becomes a stretch of stem that can grow potatoes. So the math is simple and beautiful. The more stem you bury, the more potatoes you get. Leave the plant flat, and you get one little cluster down at the bottom. Keep mounding soil up around that growing stem, and you build a whole tall column of potato-making real estate, layer upon layer, all the way up. So this is what they do. When the green tops come up about 6 or 8 inches, you pull soil up around them from both sides, mounding it into a little ridge, burying the lower half of the plant so only the top leaves peek out. The plant just keeps reaching for the sun, growing taller, and in a week or two, you do it again. And again. 3-4 times through the season, building those mounds higher and higher, a foot tall or more by summer's end. Every time you bury more stem, you're planting more potatoes without ever touching another seed. That long buried column fills, top to bottom, with tubers, and that, friend, is how one plant gives you a feast instead of a handful. Now, here's a wrinkle the Amish came to that saves your back and your sweat both. You don't have to use soil. Many of them hill with thick, loose straw instead, piling it up around the stems just the same. And straw does the soil's job, and then some. It's light as a feather, so come harvest you don't dig. You just rake it back and the potatoes are lying right there, clean as a whistle, like Easter eggs in the morning. That straw blanket keeps the ground beneath it cool and damp through the worst of the summer heat, just the way a potato likes it. It smothers the weeds so you're not out there fighting them on your knees. And it does one more quiet, important thing. It blocks the sunlight from ever reaching those tubers. That matters more than you'd guess. When sunlight hits a potato, even one poking up near the surface, it turns green. And that green isn't just ugly. It's a sign the potato has made a natural toxin that'll turn your stomach if you eat enough of it. A deep blanket of straw or soil keeps every tuber down in the dark where it belongs, sweet and white and safe. So hilling doesn't just multiply your crop, it protects it too. Now, before we go further, I'll mention this once. The Amish kept all these growing ways in plain handwritten books, passed down through the families, every trick of the soil set down in careful ink. I came across a modern collection of these old methods, and it's linked down below in the description if you'd like the whole thing in one place. No pressure at all, everything you need is right here in this video, but it's there if you want it. Now, while those plants are climbing and you're building your mounds, there's one window that matters above all others, and it's when the plants flower. Those little white and purple blossoms are the plant's way of telling you it's busy underground, setting and filling its tubers right then. And right then is when steady, consistent water makes all the difference. Water deep and even through flowering, never letting the bed go bone dry and then drowning it, and those tubers swell up fat. Let them go thirsty during that window, and they stay small and knobby no matter what else you've done. Even water in, big potatoes out. It's nearly that simple. A few last bits of old wisdom, because they all add up. Give your plants room, a foot or more between them, because crowd them too close and they choke each other down to marbles. Move your potato patch to fresh ground each year, never the same spot twice running, because that rotation keeps blight and disease from building up in the soil and waiting for you. Tuck a few beans nearby if you like, they make fine neighbors. But keep your potatoes well clear of tomatoes, for they're cousins that share the same diseases and only spread trouble to each other. And when the season closes out, the tops will yellow and wither and fall over all on their own. That's the plant telling you it's done, and that's your signal to stop watering and let the skins toughen up underground for a week or two so they'll keep. Then you dig, gentle as you can, and you cure them, laid out in a dark, airy, cool place for 2 weeks, so those skins harden into proper armor for the root cellar. And the smallest, soundest tubers, you set those aside. Those become next spring's seed, and the whole circle begins again, year after year, costing you nothing but care. That's the Amish way, start to finish. Chit them, callus them, plant them deep, hill them high, water them through bloom, and you don't add up your harvest, you multiply it. So tell me down in the comments, have you ever tried hilling your potatoes high, or have you been growing them flat all along? And will you give the straw method a go this year? I'd truly love to know.